just trying my best to talk with everybody and communicate the best I can. But I think this came to me from Crypto Tiger. And so Strong's H6666 is righteous judgment. And I think that's amazing that the gap between these eclipses are exactly that. And he also, I think you're going to have this in the next slide, or very soon, where there's 3 months, or 3 years, 3 months, 3 weeks, 3 days. Okay, you got it right here. Okay, that's perfect. So, okay, so this other eclipse, there's an eclipse on December 14th, 2020. So that's another really significant one. I believe that was in Virgo as well. I don't really remember. I think it was. But that is the perfect midpoint between these eclipses. And so, yeah, from August 21st, 2017, to this other eclipse on December 14th, 2020. It's 3 years, 3 months, 3 weeks, 3 days. And some people say, how do you get that? Well, there's a lot of calculators out there that'll do it. I go to time and date calculator to show that. But and then also from that middle eclipse, December 14th, 2020 to April 8th, is 3 years, 3 months, 3 weeks, and 3 days. Only God could orchestrate something so perfect like this. And if that weren't enough by itself, that's incredible. But when did the heebie-jeebie huala-huma-hama thing start? That everybody gets censored when they say it. That's why we scratched out the words here. We don't want to get censored. You guys all know what we're talking about. When did that all start? That started December 14th, when they started to distribute the heebie-jeebies to everybody. So, coincidence? I don't think so. I think these eclipses are a sign, and the events that happened on planet Earth lined up with these things. So, quite incredible there. I didn't look at any, what it was 3333 mean. That probably means something significant. I probably should have. But yeah, very cool.
Yeah, I didn't think to look at that either.
I'll look while you're talking, actually. I'll just make sure.
Okay. I want to go back to this slide because in the last video I talked about this a lot, what these circles were. I just want to briefly go over what these circles are again. The blue circle, the hurricane circle, at that circle was the worst hurricane to ever hit the United States. Galveston, 1900, killed the most people. When I say worst, I mean the most people died. Upwards of 10,000 to 12,000 people died in that hurricane. 7,000 buildings were destroyed. Also, as we already talked about, in Corpus Christi, on 2017, while the Revelation 12 sign was showing, a Hurricane Harvey hit right on that line, and it was the second worst hurricane in terms of money being spent. $125 billion that costs, and that's right on that circle where that cross is, that blue one. And then if you look at the red circle, and I know a lot of people have been talking about this, so most people have probably heard this, but the New Madrid earthquake fault runs right where that conjunction is. It's also over an area called Little Egypt, and there's a lot of stuff about that, which, seems like it's from God. But if that fault were to go off today, like it went off in 1811 and 1812, it would damage a lot of cities that weren't there in 1811, like Memphis and St. Louis and other cities, and it would cause huge amounts of damage, huge costs, huge loss of life, lots of bridges destroyed, lots of railroads destroyed. Earthquakes that happen in the east, especially in this area, are much more impactful than the ones that happen out in California because of the type of soil that's there. When the 1811 earthquake happened, it rang bells. It rang the Liberty Bell in Pennsylvania. It affects the entire East Coast and into Denver when this kind of stuff happens in the east. So it would impact a large area, and that's only for a 7.7, which is a high earthquake, but we know they can go higher than that. And because we've had 9.0s in Alaska. So if something like that were to hit, that would be devastating to the country. The tornado alley is right between them, and tornadoes have been increasing in numbers in single storms, and Tornado Alley seems to be shifting more towards the east. But the big thing that could destroy the country in one day is the volcanoes that are up near Washington, Oregon, and this is crossing right over Oregon, right over Crater Lake, and right over Mount Jefferson, and very close to Yellowstone.
Are you on slide 31 right now, Keith?
I can't see the numbers on mine.
Okay, but you're on Righteous Judgment 6.
Righteous Judgment. Yeah.
Okay, and sorry to interrupt. And I will share my screen since we're on that theme, so we don't. So we have,
Okay.
I will show that 333 thing. So 3333 in Greek means I summon to myself, send forth. So it's, in other words, it's an invitation, or called, or summoned. So that's pretty cool. I will call you. I will summon you.
Come up here.
Yeah. Oh boy. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, didn't think of that one, but yeah, that's primarily look at that. Talking about inviting, calling, or summoning somebody. And then Hebrew is meaning a test. When it was cast, so just a small little thing there. But yeah, there you go. Back to your screen.
So if Crater Lake used to be a large volcano, and at some time in the past, and people debate when this actually happened, but at some time in the past, that volcano, that huge mountain, basically evaporated in an explosion, and it made the second deepest lake in the world. That's what happened because of that. And when those kinds of volcanoes erupt, all that ash goes into the atmosphere. Obviously, it wipes out the area around it, but it also goes up into the atmosphere, and it makes the sun darken, which sounds biblical, like it has sackcloth on it. It could make the moon turn red, and make beautiful sunsets and sunrises. Also, that look red and orange. It also would destroy crops. It would loads of ash piling up that have to be removed. In the air, it caused glass particles in the air to get into your lungs. It would be horrible. And Crater Lake is still there, and it has been active, and it could blow again. More likely, Yellowstone would blow, which would be something that the world has never experienced in humanity's history, and completely wipe out the United States in one day. And it also affect Europe. And an ash cloud would affect everyone. And we wouldn't have to worry about global warming anymore, unless God wanted us to, because that would definitely make the temperature go down for a while, unless something happened to the sun to make that go up. So those are the righteous judgments that we were looking at in the last. We talked about it more in the last one, live stream, if you want to go back and rewatch that one or watch it for the first time. And we just talked about this one, and here's an example of a volcano putting ash into the sky. For the stars of heaven and the constellations thereof shall not give their light. The sun shall be darkened in his going forth, and the moon shall not cause her light to shine. And that sounds like a volcanic eruption. So now we know there's two paths. There's the wide path and there's the narrow gate. We're going to talk about the tribulation first. One of the areas that Aaron told me about, I think maybe Carl told him about this, was that the path of the eclipse, and you can see it on the small picture, the path of the eclipse goes right over Roswell, New Mexico, which is well known for the many rumors regarding the flying discs and things, and that were actually the Roswell Army Airfield actually put out a statement at one point that said, we found a disc, and then they retracted it. And that's the statement there. The many rumors regarding the flying disc became a reality yesterday when the intelligence office of the 509th Bomb Group of the 8th Air Force Roswell Army Airfield was fortunate enough to gain possession of a disc through the cooperation of one of the local ranchers and the sheriff's office. And they printed it in the paper at the time, and there's the paper. That's real. That really happened. But we think most Christians think that there aren't aliens that are landing on the Earth. There are probably other things, but they're going to be used as an excuse when however many millions of people leave this Earth, and however many millions of children leave this Earth. They're going to be used as an excuse for how they left, why they left. And then another area that's very close to the eclipse, but not exactly on it. It's right here compared to the eclipse. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but it's right there.
Yeah,
is
perfect.
Area 51, located in the middle of the barren desert in Nevada. It's an Air Force installation that is secret to this day. Nobody's allowed to visit there for this day, but it's been hypothesized that it's where they test alien technology that they've recovered from crash sites, and a couple movies have been made about it, and it's pretty cool to think about. But this is probably not true, but it probably will be used as an excuse. Look, the eclipse has passed over these alien places, and the aliens they're the ones that took the kids and took the born-again Christian cult, crazy people, and then now we're going to talk about the eclipses up until 2030. And again, the sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the great and glorious day of the Lord comes. And here's the eclipse that Aaron told me about in August 2nd, 2027. And you can see that it goes over Egypt, Israel, and Saudi Arabia, partially for Israel. And that it also is hitting most of that economic corridor that Netanyahu has been talking about. That economic corridor goes right through the top of that partial area of that eclipse.
So I think this is a big deal, because if 2027 is the midpoint, we have an eclipse going over, like, perfectly over Egypt, right? And we have all these verses that we could even do a live stream just on this eclipse alone for an hour or two, pulling up all the Egypt verses and going through Exodus and going through the other prophetic books talking about Egypt. And here we have a perfect solar eclipse in the middle of 2027 in the summer there. It also goes over Israel, not the main section of it, but Israel will certainly see this eclipse, like a partial version of it. Well, close to full, actually. But the core of it is really in Egypt in 27. So I think this is a really fascinating find, and it could be the midpoint-ish, give or take. So
yeah, and it's a good time to mention again that Jewish rabbis believe that things that happen to the sun are for the Gentiles, signs for the Gentiles, and things that happen to the moon are signs for the Jews. And when you've got a solar eclipse, that's the sun and the moon doing things. The moon is covering the sun. So a solar eclipse could be a sign for both. And it's going right over Egypt, which is, says it's going to be destroyed at some point, and it hasn't yet. So in the Bible, everything the Bible says is going to happen comes true. So this could be the timing. And the solar eclipse on June 1st, 2030, which crosses that other eclipse right here. And, like we talked about before, here's another crossing right here and another crossing right here. Right in this whole area, there's 3 crossings of eclipses that are happening in a 10-year period, which, that just normally doesn't happen over land, over places that you're talking about. The Earth's 70% water. Most eclipses happen over water, and most crossings happen over water. But here you have these crossings happening right during what we think is going to be the tribulation, right over these areas that, have something to do with the tribulation. And this June 1st, 2031, do you want to talk about this, Aaron?
So, yeah, this is a big deal. I just found I think Keith pointed me in this direction. Or not Keith, Carl. And so this is a big deal. All right, so this eclipse in June, which could be the second coming year. I'm not saying that this is the second coming, but this is very special eclipse. You see how there's the 7 churches there in Turkey that was written in the first chapter 2 and 3 in Revelation. So this eclipse goes over all that, but this eclipse also goes over the Patmos Island, which is where the book of Revelation was written. And it also goes over all the locations like Galatia and all that. So maybe what I'll do is I'll share my screen and I'll just show some pictures here. But this red line that on Keith's screen, just take a mental note of where that is. And now I'm going to switch over to my screen and show you this. So hopefully you guys can see that. Looks like you can. So it goes over all this area. This is a picture from my Bible, the back of my Bible. Maybe I'll go back to the a little better, and I'll make it slightly bigger here. So you can see how this eclipse goes over here. This is where Paul's third and fourth journeys were traveling all over the place. But you can see Corinth. We know the book of Corinthians. There's that. Thessalonica, right over there. Philippi, Ephesus, Ephesians, Galatians. So most of the Bible was performed and written in this area, and so we have an eclipse going over Patmos and going over the 7 churches and going over where the New Testament was essentially written, and that's in the summer of 2030. I'll show you one other picture. So this is really fascinating. Same kind of picture, just to show you a different angle. And again, we've got Ephesus, Antioch, Philippi, Thessalonica, and Corinth. But, so that's June 1st, 2030. And where is this eclipse in Stellarium? Well, it is, let's see if I got the right one here. One second. What comes up? Okay, hopefully my screen is on there. Looks like it is. It's going black. Come on now, computer. Sorry about that. I know it's all white, it's all white. Let's just refresh the page, see what happens here. Okay, redo. So June 1st, let's get it real quick here. So, this eclipse, which was presented by Carl, it's in the head of Taurus. Let me get it to the right thing here. Isn't that cool? Can you see it, Keith?
I can see it, yeah.
There we go. So this eclipse in June, as the eclipse goes through the 7 churches and essentially the land where all these New Testament was written, addressed to, it's in the head of Taurus, between the horns of the bull. Wow. Right in front of Orion. That's perfect. That's perfect. And Pleiades, the 7 stars, we've talked about that possibly being representing the 7 churches as well.
And they're right there.
Right there. Right where the eclipse is going through in the first place. That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yep. They're for signs.
Yeah, so let's see if I can, is this June 1st? Is this June 1st? Is this June 1st? It is, okay. Let's blow up this video, and let's just show, it's like a 10-second video from time and date. It shows you the pattern of it. And there it goes over Lake Patmos and over all the area where the New Testament was written. And it goes over all of Russia, ends around the whole Chinese area or whatever, and just a perfect pattern there. And then the one in 2030, I'll show you that one. I think this is the one in November. Let's see if it is. Looks like it is.
So that last one was in 2030, June 1st, 2030, and this one's November 2030, right?
Yeah, this one is after all the feasts, and then I'll show you on Stellarium where it is in on Stellarium. So this looks like a big smiley face, but let the video play out. You know, but Israel would end up being in the right eye. Like if this is the smiley face, Israel would end up being in the right eye of the face. You know, I'm just reminded of those verses. You know, the apple of my eye and things of that. That could be a whole other study as well. But let me see if this other stellarium will pull up here. And if it won't, I gotta reset it here. And I gotta show you where it is. I gotta reset it here. So that's November, I think 25th, right?
I don't remember the date for that one.
Pretty sure it's November 25th. Let's go see where it is. And that should be in Libra. My computer's been acting up lately with all the signal and everything. Okay, so maybe it's the 24th, or let's just get to it kind of quick here. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so it's in the claw, more or less, and in Libra. Right after the feast, when Jupiter's there.
So that's the scales, right? That's judgment.
Mm-hmm. So that's the end of 2030, when it looks like the solar eclipse is smiling on Earth. Like finally, justice and judgment has been served. Finally, you know. I'm hoping that's the case, you know. And the reason why I like 2030, since we're here, I might as well back it up a month or two. And so we have, this is the end of September, right around the fall feast. Okay, not too concerned right now about the actual day. But Jupiter is perfectly in Libra. Venus and Mercury are at the head of Virgo. We have Mars in Leo. We got the Moon coming in. Well, that would let's just bump it forward a couple days. So Feast of Trumpets would be around here, you know, September 29th or something of that year. And then, so that means Atonement would be somewhere around, you know, something like that, October 8th, when Venus and Mercury are in conjunction. Perfect.
Yeah, look at that.
You know? Go a little closer, but yeah, Mercury and Venus are more or less in conjunction. In the arm of Virgo, the Son of Righteousness will come with healing in his wings. That's the last book of the Old Testament. And we have Jupiter in the judgment scales. I love it. It's just a perfect alignment for 2030. And then 2 months later, we have an eclipse. And it goes over underneath Israel. It's a big, you can't help but look at it and look at it as a big smiley face.
Yeah.
So here's that smiley face once again. So very, very exciting that this eclipse goes over. This eclipse in June goes over where the Bible was written in the summer 2030, and then after the fall feast, we got a big smiley face. But that's what it looked like to me anyway.
Yeah. And again, it's just like if it was just that, you know, just a pile of things.
Yeah. So maybe since I have my thing open, I'll just skim through my things, and then we'll get back to your slideshow. So
Okay.
I have all these things open. Let's just. Oh yeah. So I wanted to show this, even though you can show it. But here's Omega.
Right. Town of Omega.
Yeah, right beside Salem, and that's where that conjunction is taking place. October 8th, Alpha and Omega. We showed you these 4 things. What's this? Atmos. Oh yeah, there's the island of Atmos. That's where this eclipse will go through in June. What's this? Just sketch it out. This one. Oh yeah, okay. This is a bunch of eclipses from 2021 to 2040. Okay, so this is another thing worth noting, that this eclipse that's happening in 2030 right here. So this eclipse in 2030 over, you know, Atmos and where all the Testament was written, it's not going to happen again until 2060. So an eclipse in this zone, I should even say, it's not going to happen again. Nothing close to it's going to happen again until 2060. So I think that's pretty cool. This is just the thing about Sukkot, so don't need to read that. That's just a calculator. Oh, here is I'll show you this one. Corpus Christi is a feast, and it resembles the body of Christ. So that eclipse on October 14th, 2023 is going through Corpus Christi at the end. This I did like a 1 hour live stream at the beginning of the year with Brother Samuel, but I wanted to just highlight this particular story. He reminded me of it when I asked him some questions. And yeah, we could talk about this forever, but the vision of Ezekiel from 40 verse 1 in calculated date, that's roughly around 570 BC. If you add 1260 years to that, it brings you at 680 with this right here. This has been called again the Golden
Dome of the Rock.
Yes, Dome of the Rock, sorry. So 1260 years from that, the year of the vision brings you to that. And then you add 1260 years, that gets you to when Israel's transformation. And if you add 1335 years from 1688, that gets you to 2023.
Yes. Blessed are those that make it to there. That's what the Bible verse says in Daniel.
That's right. So that could be a really excellent parallel. Now, I did get an email from another gentleman that was suggesting...
Can I add one thing onto that, too?
Go ahead, yeah.
3.5 months, if you look up how many days are average in 3.5 months, it's 1,279 days. And if you add 1,279 days to 688, you get 1967, which is when we got all of Jerusalem. And there's a Bible verse, I'm sorry, I don't remember what it is. Maybe somebody can tell us in the comments, that says that the Gentiles will trample the outside courtyard of the temple for 42 months, which is on average, 1979 days. So, and that's what happened. They trampled Jerusalem, and then we got it back.
Okay, yeah, awesome. And I will add one little thing. Now, we all know that these years can be a year or two off, so this 688 can be bumped in direction. So, one fun thing here. So this is the first year, 573. That year is 2 years off, so if it's 571, that is 2,600 years and 20 years. So that means it's 52 Jubilee cycles. 50. So 50 times 52 is 2,600, and that's 52 Jubilee cycles of 50 to 2030. Yahweh 10565 is 26. So 2,600, 26, Yahweh 10565. That's how many Jubilee cycles it is from, if this is slightly off, to 571 to 2030. It's worth noting, worth bringing up. I don't know how accurate that is, but either way, if you take the 573 BC date, you got some real cool presentation here. And if you bump it back a year or two, then that would line up perfectly to 2030 as well. So that's just food for thought. And then was there anything else that I had on my slides? I think that was it on my area, so we'll bring your slides back up.
Okay, and I'm almost finished.
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention that, lunar eclipses, here's the upcoming lunar eclipses that are coming over Israel. These are total lunar eclipses. There's some partial ones that are coming up. In fact, one's coming up in October, a partial one. This first one is on Tu B'Av. The second one is on Purim Hebron. And the third one is on the Festival of Liberation. And Purim Hebron and the Festival of Liberation are Jewish holidays that are like more civic than religious. And the 20th of December is also on Purim Hebron or close to it. So these dates will all mean something to the Jewish people when they happen. And if these are signs for upcoming possible things, judgments, then it will mean something to them at each of these eclipses. And then now we wanted to talk about the narrow path, the rapture, and what happens to us afterwards. And what I'm going to show here is just math. This is just math. I'm not setting a date, and I'm not, although a date will be said, I'm not setting a date. This is just one possibility in all the possibilities that could happen. But upcoming, we have October 6th, which is the last day of Sukkot, which Aaron talked about at the very beginning of the presentation. And that date is called Hoshana Rabbah, which means the great salvation in Hebrew. And during that service of that last day of Sukkot, I always say it wrong, Sukkot, the people in the synagogue will go around the bima seat, the bima part of the tabernacle, 7 times, and they will ask for salvation, and they will say, God save us, God save us, God save us. 7 times they go around asking for salvation, and at the end of that 7 times, it says they say something that says, and then a shout is heard from heaven, and they don't say what the shout says, which I think the shout's saying, "Come up."
Wow, I didn't realize that. They walk around what 7 times?
7 times the bima, which is where the altar, I guess, is. That's where we get the name Bema Seat of Christ from. The bima, it's like basically
Really?
like,
Wow.
yeah.
Cool. Okay, they walk around the bema seat 7 times. And say,
Well, it's just the bima, not
the
the
bema.
seat.
Okay,
Yeah.
so they walk around it 7 times. They save us.
And they say, "Save us from this and save us from that, save us from not having water," and there's a whole liturgy, exactly what they say. And then they say, and then we heard a great shout, and that's the end. That's the end of their service. And and they're hitting willows, they're beating willows on the ground to get rid of their sins. And it's just a different service. It doesn't happen any other time during Sukkot. And then the next day, we were talking about Shemini Atzeret, and I think Dr. Barry All was talking about that date too. And that is when circumcision happens, you were saying, I think, Aaron?
Yeah.
Right? And Atzeret means to tarry. And I know there's a verse in, how do you say it,
Habakkuk, yeah.
Yeah, that says, I will not tarry. So it seems to fit with that. And that happens on October 7th. So I'm thinking maybe Hoshana Rabbah is a possible high watch date for October 7th. And then, as you know, in Genesis 7:4, it says God told Noah and his family to get on the ark. And then 7 days later, it started to rain. So there was a get on the ark, and then 7 days later, and we're told that these are like the days of Noah. So possibly there's a 7-day warning there for us, or 7 days that we're away before the catastrophes happen. And then we have October 14th, which is the Shabbat Bereshit eclipse in the beginning. Possibly that's when catastrophes start to happen.
Wow, yeah, this is really lining up as you talk through this, brother. Yeah, this is really neat. Yeah.
And then 1,260 days later, according to Revelation 12:6, the woman is taken into the wilderness and protected for 1,260 days. And then that would take us to March 27th, 2027, which could be the abomination that causes desolation. And depending on which calendar you look at, that could be the Shabbat of the red heifer, or the Shabbat of the Tezav, which means command, or it could be during Passover. And red heifer, obviously, we've all been following the red heifers, and the fact that there are red heifers and they can be turned into purification, their ashes can be added to water to purify people. Tezav is where priests are ordained. That's where the instruction is given to Aaron and his sons on how to ordain priests. And we're going to talk about that in a couple minutes. And also how to do each of the types of sacrifices for sin and sacrifices for other things. And then it could be during Passover. And like Aaron, you were saying that the devil likes to mimic God, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
what better time than...
Yeah, so we're always dealing with this 1 month off thing, 1 month. So even when you check the Torah calendars and you check the Shabbat calendars and you go, and there's always this discrepancy. But if we get raptured if we just kind of keep it simple, if we get raptured fairly soon, Passover of 2027 could be the midpoint.
Right.
It fits really well to do that, to mimic God in that way. And then you brought up the red heifer Shabbat there too, depending on the calendar you're looking at.
Right. And then 1290 days later, if you look at Daniel 12, I have something on my screen. 12:11, that says that after the abomination of desolation, there's 1290 days until the end. When Daniel asked, when's the end? And he said 1290 days. And then if you take 1290 days on time and date, you get to October 7th, 2030, which is Yom Kippur, which many people believe is the date of the second coming. Mm-hmm. And we're allowed to know the day and the hour of that. So the second coming. And then if you add 45 days more, which would be the 1335 days for the total fulfillment of that verse, it takes you to 25th of Sheshvan, and that is the only month that does not have any holidays or special mitzvahs, which are orders or commands. We are taught that it is reserved for the time of Moshiach, which is how the Jews say Messiah, who will inaugurate the third temple in the month of Sheshvan, or maybe that's New Jerusalem. So just looking at the math, if you look at October 14th, the first eclipse, and add 2,550 days, you get October 7th, 2030, Yom Kippur. And somebody, Gary in the comments told me about this, by the way. So I added his little thing here.
Yeah, and one little thing too. And look, we're all speculating. We're trying to crunch our numbers and make the best presentation. Another thought and theory is that there is actually 75 days after Yom Kippur. Okay, so if you kind of bump back the midpoint 3 days, then that means you got 1260 before Yom Kippur, and that would mean you have 75 days to play with after Yom Kippur. And if that's the case, that would bring you to Hanukkah. So you would add 75 days to Hanukkah after Yom Kippur. So again, we're struggling with this 30-day, 1 month off thing. So maybe God's going to do it in a slightly different way than what we're presenting here. But I have always liked the idea of 75 days after Yom Kippur fulfilling these day counts from Daniel myself. So we'll see how it all plays out.
Right. And then what happens to us? And Revelation 1:6 and another place in Revelation, I think also it says, and hath made us kings and priests unto God and his Father. To him be glory and dominion forever and ever. In the Jewish tradition, the chief priest lived in the temple for 7 days before Yom Kippur to practice. In Leviticus 8:33, which we were talking about with the Shabbat command, tizava, however you say it, the priests who were getting ordained, they had to stay in the tabernacle for 7 days. And that's what we'll be doing. We'll be going up and we'll be staying in heaven or the tabernacle or mansions or someplace for 7 days. And then we come down with Jesus 7 days later. And also, Jesus used the metaphor of the wedding ceremony. And in that wedding ceremony, for 7 days, the bride and the groom are in the wedding chamber, and I believe the groom's allowed to leave, but the bride has to stay there for 7 days, and then they come out and have a feast.
Right. So, Keith and I read the Bible 2 days ago. I'm like, hey, Keith, you want to read some, quote unquote boring chapters of the Bible? Like, yeah, okay, let's do it. So we read Leviticus 8, and I mean, this was for me a massive rapture proof and a massive reason why this tribulation is 7 years as well. So Leviticus 8:33 through 36. In order to get the priest ready, you'd have to go into the tabernacle for 7 days, and then you can do your priestly duties. So, who are we? Well, he wrote at Revelation 1:6. We are kings and priests, talking to the church in the book of Revelation. So, if we're a priest, we need to be consecrated. And for how long? Well, the Bible says 7 days, and so 7 days in His kingdom, while 7 years is going outside the temple. on planet Earth. We have a rapture proof before the 7 years, and he's consecrating the priest. How fitting and how perfect to fit this into the priest analogy. And if you want to go down the side of the whole bride thing, well, that's a 7-day thing too, as a Galilean wedding. So either way you slice the cake, it fits real nice. And Yom Kippur was the big day that the priest would atone for the sins and do all the rituals that they did in the Old Testament. Lots of readings about, sprinkle the blood 7 times in your ear and all this kind of stuff all over the place. So lots of sevens.
Lots of sevens in Leviticus.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. What's the next slide here?
And this is the end. And ye shall not go out of the door of the tabernacle of the congregation in 7 days until the days of your consecration be it a man. For 7 days shall he consecrate. Leviticus 8:33.
Right, so if he needs a priest in heaven, he needs more than 3.5 days to consecrate. You know what I'm saying, guys? So that's just his law. I didn't make up the law. He made it. God made the rules up. And so it doesn't make sense that we're there for 3.5 years and we come back, because that breaks his own rules. He's not going to do that. And so there's your 7-year pattern. But anyway, going on down. Is that your last one that you got?
Yep, that's it.
Okay. So let's just summarize our thoughts here. And I'll hide this. And yeah. So give us your summary of this video.
Well, I'd say that if you're looking, like we already said, if you're looking at just one sign, you say, okay. But you just look at the compilation of signs. And the compilation of signs is telling us that God's coming very, very soon. The signs say he's coming his second coming is 2030. I think there's like 40 different ways you can get to that. If it's 2030 and it's a pre-tribulation rapture, then he's got to come in 2023. It's 2023 now, and it's only going to be 2023 until, for a couple more months. And then you look at the eclipses. The eclipses, if I was to draw at something on the United States showing the worst possible disasters to happen, it would be a big aleph on the United States, and I would hit every horrible disaster, naturally made disaster that could happen. And that's exactly what happens. You have the aleph and the Tav on the United States. God has his signature written in moon shadows, sun shadows, moon shadows on the United States. There has to be a new Babylon. One of the countries has to be the new Babylon, or cities, and get destroyed. The United States looks like it's the perfect, especially lately, looks like it's the perfect one for that. Also, something we didn't mention, I think we brought up in chat the other day, was that somehow the Jewish people have to get out of the United States and go to Israel. And there's a verse that says, my people come out of her. That could be the Jewish people leaving the United States to go to Israel when all of these disasters start to happen. Because if it's Yellowstone, that happens in the west, there's time for the east, the people on the east to leave. And I believe most of the Jewish population is in the east. So there's the Aleph and the Tav, there's the disasters. I don't know, what would you add to that, Aaron?
I think what we're doing here is, I've been talking about 2030 as the second coming, as a potential second coming. We're always speculating, but 2030 makes the most sense in like 40 different ways. You do the math in the Bible. Judas sold Joseph for 20 pieces of silver. Judas sold Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. You get your 20, 30. 20 divided by 30 is 0.6666666. If that weren't enough, King David died 3,000 years before 2030. Jesus comes from the seed of David and will rule on David's throne. They are expecting their Messiah to come from the seed of David. We have these Agenda 2030, if that wasn't enough, this evil plan. We have these solar eclipses really showing a picture of destruction in 2024. If that weren't enough, we have solar eclipses that surround Israel in 30, where over Patmos Island and where the majority of the New Testament was written, which won't happen again until 2060, 2027. Eclipse over Egypt, possible midpoint or midpoint year. Accident? I don't think so. We are close to the 6,000 year plan. In Genesis, he tells Noah, I'm not going to strive with man for 120 years, but I think he was actually saying 120 jubilees. 120 times 50 is 6,000. I believe that we are approximately 7 years away from year 6,000, which I expect to be the second coming. It's been almost 2,000 years since the cross, by 2030, more or less. We can't really push this much further. We've got the math to prove it. We've got the solar eclipses to prove it. We have the Eagle plans proving it. We have the palm scanners ready to go. We've got the cameras in all the stores. How else do you want to show us that this is right around the corner? So in terms of simplicity, what I'm going to say is that if the rapture doesn't happen by 2014, November 14th, because that's really about 7 prophetic years from the Day of Atonement, then we gotta really go back to the drawing board and go, what did we miss? When's the second coming? We gotta restructure everything by around the middle of November. It makes complete sense for us to get out of here anytime between now and the middle of November. Complete sense. It makes perfect sense for us to